Over 1 million teachers use IXL in their classrooms every day for one reason. They love it. The gold standard teaching and learning solution, IXL provides thousands of instructional resources, actionable analytics, and assessments to increase teacher capacity and effectiveness. IXL takes the guesswork out of lesson planning with ready-made plans. Built-in engagement tools such as customizable competitions make learning fun for students. Dr. Trujillo, superintendent at Tuscan Unified School District, says this about IXL, quote, "For the teacher, IXL opens up the door to be a lot more effective and provide more differentiated instruction to the different subgroups of students in their class," end quote. Empower your teachers with the tools and insights they need to enhance instruction, all in one single, easy to use platform. Get started today at IXL.com.
You're listening to Monday Matters, a Principal Matters podcast production.
Hi, Principal Matters friends. This is Will Parker back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another Monday Matters. Jen, this recording is going to be coming out pretty soon after we have been together. So I think this is the Monday Matters coming out on the 26th. If my youngest brother, Sam, is listening, who does the music for our show, happy birthday, Sam.
Oh, happy birthday, Sam.
Yeah. He's such a delightful artist and an amazing person. How are you? I know that as we step into the end of a month and we're getting blasted with cold weather over this weekend, and I don't know about you guys, but how are you and how are the Schwankes?
Well, that's the same thing. Everybody's kind of batting down the hatches here because the cold is here, but also apparently a significant amount of snow. So when this is airing, I don't know. It might be snowed in. So get ready.
We might be. Well, I wanted to bring every Monday, you and I bring a topic to our audience that's more current. And then for a reminder for anyone that's listening new, Wednesdays is our flagship show where we highlight a guest, and we have so many wonderful guests. So keep listening for this week's guest on Wednesday's show. But I wanted to bring a topic today to listeners and to you and me of how do we keep our challenges in perspective. And I want to speak about this both presently, but also in terms of practice. Everyday leaders face really traumatic situations. I was actually at a conference in Fort Lauderdale recently with the SAMS National Innovation Project and got to speak on my book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? And then later in the afternoon, my daughter Emily, who gets to work with me and traveled with me, we went down to the water and just we're going to sit and read and enjoy the beauty. I sat by a principal who had attended that conference, and we struck up a conversation. And he said something to me that did not surprise me, but I was so grateful for his transparency. And his statement was, "This has been a great conference. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with the heaviness that I feel when I think about the work of our schools and when I talk to other leaders." And so, Jen, that heaviness can be defined in a lot of ways, but I just want to say it out loud. Sometimes there's heaviness that comes from the work itself. Sometimes there's heaviness that comes through what's going on in our culture and politics. Sometimes there's heaviness that people are just experiencing personally. So even before I get into I wrote some thoughts down in a post that I'll share a link to that Emily can put in the show notes. But before I even get to that, I just wanted to start there with you because keeping our challenges in perspective can be really difficult as leaders and living in the world we live in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of thinking, reading, watching, talking about where we are in the world. And it occurs to me that because things feel heavy and so uncertain and so, impossible to see what's next, right? And so what happens then, at least for me, is the challenges that I face that would be hard anyway seem heavier because it feels like another layer, right? I have to worry about the global aspect of the world. Then I have to worry about my work aspect where everybody's carrying a lot of things. And then this thing may have happened to me, somebody may be sick or somebody may be struggling or, financial social, emotional concerns, it starts to feel very, very heavy. And, before we started recording, I said to you that I feel like I am really honing my skill of acknowledging all sides to deeply complex issues and being able to make space to talk about those. And I think our listeners know exactly what I'm talking about there. Like, regardless of what you think or feel about what's happening, we have to leave space for others to be hurting, to be angry, and to be struggling.
Yeah. Wow. There's so many directions I want to go.
Right.
I'm
Me
trying
too.
I'm trying to be both focused, but also I'm trying to be honest. So let me first just speak about the present, and then I just want to speak about the practice. Because at the time of this recording, first of all, I don't know if we said this in last week's recording because we had done it in advance, but happy Martin Luther King Jr. holiday to anyone who got to celebrate that. And since we recorded before that event, we're kind of saying, I'm saying this afterwards. So I know we just experienced a holiday. But holidays like that make me reflect, like on what are the situations that we're in now where we see rights that are being violated or people's concerns that are not being listened to, or and I'm just going to say, as a person just in the present who's trying to keep my mind wrapped around my own responsibilities as a citizen of this country, I have written more letters of concern to my congressional members in the last couple of weeks than I can remember writing in a long time. And so I know that there's both things that we can all do as individuals, but then there's also things that we have to do in the places where we work, where we represent institutions, organizations, schools, et cetera, too. So I want to talk about the practice also, Jen, which is no matter what the climate is going on around us, principals are stepping into situations every single day that are often calling them to manage the trauma and the stress of other people in ways that no one else really gets to hear that story. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, and I know I probably have said this 100 other times in other episodes, but just the other day I was downstairs fixing a coffee or something, and right in the middle of my kitchen, I just got flooded with all these memories. The first time that I saw a student hitting his head against a locker because that was the way that he self-regulated, and I had no idea what to do. The first time that I had a student whose mental state was so traumatized that he was literally seeing, or he was imagining people being present in the room who were not with us in that moment, and me trying to figure out what to do in a situation that required a mental health intervention, not just a principal intervention. The first time that you can fill in the blank. Anybody that's ever had to manage a student death, anybody that's ever had to manage, all of those things are often traumatic situations that we've never been trained to manage. And then after we figure out how to manage them, what do you do with all that emotion? What do you do with how it affected your body? What do you do when even 20 years later, you're standing in the kitchen and you're making a coffee and all those thoughts come flooding back to you of those moments that you thought you had managed and tucked away, but they still come back.
Right.
And so I just want to say that out loud, because I think that the questions that leaders often ask themselves is, how do I manage my own? How do I keep how do I manage those situations, and how do I keep moving forward, even as I'm trying to figure out how to manage those?
Well, I am certainly not the expert, but I will tell you what works for me and some advice I gave to a friend of mine. My friend Judy called me from, she works at a high school in Utah, and she said, here's one for you. She said, my school counselor is asking for a leave of absence because the weight of all the problems of our kids, she's not well. Mm-hmm. How do I help my mental health specialist with her mental health? She's the one I need, right? Mm-hmm. And she was spiraling, and I certainly know that feeling, right? I have felt it in the past few months, and I go back to, and I know I've talked about this before on the podcast, but in the recovery community, there's a phrase that I just love, and it is, what is the next right thing? And that doesn't mean solve the whole problem. It doesn't
Right.
mean think that you have to change something. It might mean, what's the next right thing? Okay, I'm going to call my counselor and see how she's doing today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to call HR and see what she would need to do. Okay, I'm just do one thing at a time. And sometimes that thing is make a cup of coffee and sit there and let the memories wash over you. Sometimes that thing is step aside for a minute. But usually I find that the next right thing is check in on another human. See how they're doing. See if they can offer you advice. Make a human connection, because so much of what I think the world is struggling with right now is a lack of human connection or a missed human connection.
Yeah.
And so that's how I'm trying to use my energies and my responses is the next right thing. And usually it's connection.
And I completely agree. I know I'm all over the place when it comes to the thoughts that I'm dealing with, but this is why we do Monday Matters. But just yesterday, another school leader sent me a video of some congressional testimony where experts in neuroscience and student learning were just sharing the delays that we see now in this most current generation of children that seem to be correlated with how much time they spend on phones. And Dr. Jean Twing has been doing research on this at the University of San Diego, I believe. I'm pulling that out of my memory. But I've read some of her research in the past, and she's been on the cutting edge of showing correlations between the younger you introduce a child to a phone, the more they have challenges with their own mental health as they get older. And that shouldn't surprise us. But it's also showing up now, and it seems to be showing up in student outcomes, student learning, student test scores, this correlation between how much time on technology versus my ability to continue to learn and grow. What I don't want to do is pretend I'm a scientist, but I do want to offer some context, which is that not everything is an easy A equals B correlation either. We also live in a time when, since the advent of the smartphone, which was about 2010, that was also right at the heels of the worst financial crisis we had ever lived through at that time. And guess what happened to school funding after 2008 and 9? Mm-hmm. It plummeted. So resources to schools, access to quality teachers, all the things that we need in terms of counselors and social workers and nurses, all of that stuff was limited or pulled in some places. And we've been trying to recover ever since, in addition to the technologies and all the things that were introduced. So there's not just one easy correlation between one or the other. And I'll say this as well, not because I'm trying to minimize the present place that we're in, but you rewind to any time in the history of education and you read what letters principals were writing or teachers were writing, and they were all saying, this must be the worst situation we've ever faced with this generation of students and the kinds of outcomes that we're seeing right now. So I'm just saying all of that for one, to say, yes, what you people have to deal with is hard. And Jen and I, especially supporting the work of leaders, don't ever want to pretend like we have forgotten what it's like to be in those schools. But at the same time, because I'm not in schools every day, but I work with leaders who are, I'm listening to them. And their feedback to me is, yes, it's hard. But then when I try to think about, okay, who are those that acknowledge it's hard but are still moving forward and doing the next thing, then I'm just going to say three things really fast, Jen, because I know we're going to wrap this up for a Monday show. One is, these are people I always see committed first to the people of their work. They're people that are like, okay, I can't control the craziness, but I'm going to check in on my people. I'm going to make sure that they know I hold them to high expectations, but I'm also supporting them in whatever way it takes. Two, and I'm such a broken record, they're committed to their systems, which is, if something's not working correctly, let me rework it, or at least address it in a way that makes this work easier or better for others. And three, they're almost always, I see them returning to their belief of why am I doing this? What's that unwavering commitment that I have made to myself and to this school, that no child is expendable, that nobody's disposable, that every child here is worth the time and the investment and the care that I'm pouring into them. And so I just want to say those things out loud, because I need to hear them. And there may be somebody on the other side of us that needs to hear it too.
Right. And I think it's also important. I'm reading a great book right now and it has nothing to do with schools, but it's about a long-term relationship falling apart, and the narrator is dealing with that. And a friend pulled her aside and said, "I want you to know that what your partner has done is wrong." And she felt such freedom from that. And it occurs to me that that same message could be shared with principals. What you're doing now is, in fact, this hard. What is
Mhm.
happening that you're having to deal with is, in fact, wrong for you, that you have to deal with it. So sometimes I think it helps to say, I remember in 2008 and 9 when the financial stuff was happening, there was a lot of stories, but nobody said, hey, this is as bad as it's been.
Yeah.
So I think it helps just to acknowledge ain't nobody making up how hard this is.
Well, even as I asked that leader who just had that short little moment in his year to rest and be at a conference and relax, but who was still not able to completely separate himself from the traumas of work, I asked him, so where do you hold on to hope? Like
Yeah.
when you're dealing with this kind of work, and it all came back to his students. It all
Right.
came back to his school. It all came back to those practices that make me proud to show up there every day,
Right.
that remind me why I need to be here, why I'm in this community. And so, Jen, I just want to say this to listeners as we wrap up. It's sometimes hard to believe that the work that you're doing is as meaningful as it is, because maybe other people, you feel like you're on an island, or maybe you don't feel like people notice the work, but they do. There are
Mhm.
students today, there are teachers in your care, there are community members in your care whose lives are better because you're there, and who are able to believe things about themselves they wouldn't if somebody didn't step in and
Mhm.
encourage them that direction. Um, I was sitting by another principal who I met from New York City. She is now the principal in the same neighborhood where she grew up. And she was
Right.
telling me about just the joy she gets in watching these children and parents and this community experience school in a way that she's just so proud to see
Right.
them experience every day. That's happening even in the hardest places, Jen. And so Principal Matters listeners, I hope this conversation has been helpful for you as you keep perspective, even in the hard times, and you hold on to your belief in your people and your belief in improving the systems you can, and the belief in your beliefs
Right.
that what you do really is important.
Right.
All right, Jen. Well, as we wrap up, how can our leaders stay connected with you and your wonderful resources and your newsletter?
Yes. Find me at jenschwanke.com, and there's a link there for the newsletter. And if you want to subscribe to that, it is Principal Problems with Dr. Jen. And you can just dump in your email and you'll get a newsletter every Tuesday.
Thank you, Jen. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for listening this week and for doing what matters. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williambparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Monday Matters.